Es ist mir eine Freude, Sie heute Abend dabei zu haben. Bitte fassen Sie die Hände für unseren ersten Teilnehmer zusammen, den super über 20 Debatter von D.GG und Besitzer des weltweit größten männlichen Penis, Vosh Vidya! Thank you, Carl. Happy to be here. Ihm beizutreten ist die körperliche Verkörperung jeder Person, mit der jemals nicht einverstanden war. Eine abscheuliche Mischung aus Fleisch und Kronen und Kontrarianismus. Velcro!
I'm very uncomfortable with the energy in this room.
Das heutige Thema politische Gewalt, insbesondere die wird sich für eine Teilnahme in einer gewaltsamen Revolution einzusetzen. Vosh Vidya, dass sie mehr Sexpartner hatten als alle Debattengegner, die sie jemals zusammengestellt haben, lassen wir sie just los.
Thank you. Now, let's get right to the heart of the matter, because I have nothing to hide behind. Yes, I believe wholeheartedly in the necessity of targeted, defensive violence to secure the interests of the working class. Yes, I advocate for the deconstruction of the social structure in which we live, a system kept secure behind the uniformed bodies of police officers, military personnel, intelligence operatives, and private security forces. If you share my desire to see this system supplanted in favor of one more ethical, more sustainable, more humane, then the pertinent question is not whether violence must be applied, but rather how it can be applied. Because we will never seize our world from the powers that be without it. Vote, please, and reform from within. But when the time comes, the ballot box will not be the tool by which we bring about a better world.
Pretty words, Vosh, but empty. Even if I granted you the assumption that there is a better society to be built than this one, you have utterly failed to demonstrate the morality, the effectiveness, and the necessity of advocating for and engaging in a violent revolution. This is why I hate debating communists' convincing rhetoric but no actual data to back it up. You didn't even say anything worth responding to.
I'm not a communist, Velcro, and I actually agree with you. I've got a lot of ground to cover before I'm done making a convincing case for violence. That is why we're here, right? You mentioned 3 avenues by which an argument need be made. Let's focus on morality first. Now, tell me, Velcro, do you believe in an individual's right to defend themselves? Lethally, if necessary?
I do. Are you about to pretend throwing a revolution is as much an act of self-defense as shooting a mugger?
I pretend nothing, you acrid-smelling sack of shit. We, collectively, hold some very strange views concerning violence and what constitutes self-defense. Everyone knows killing to save your own life from an aggressor is morally and legally permissible. And because law follows from morality, not the opposite, it would be reasonable to say killing to save your life from an aggressor would be morally permissible even if it weren't legal. An antebellum slave, for example, who bludgeons her master to death to spare herself abuse. She'd be put to death back then, certainly, but her violence was unquestionably a justified act of self-defense. Tell me then, if a congressional body passes legislation which strips millions of American citizens of their health coverage, and it was done exclusively to serve the financial interests of the businesses which lobbied in favor of that bill's passing, would violence against the state not be an act of self-defense? People, many of them, would die, all for wealth. What is that but a mugging?
You can't equivocate individual acts of deliberate violence with legislation which has negative consequences. That's absurd.
It's so fucking strange to me how conservatives tout civility and rule of law up until somebody mentions gun control, at which point they jerk themselves raw, threatening to gun down federal agents at their doorstep.
I'm not a conservative. I'm everyone who disagrees with you. Mostly conservatives. Also, your right to a firearm is enshrined in the Second Amendment. There is no such right to medical coverage.
Then it's a good thing I'm not a constitutionalist. Yeah, I'd say affordable, accessible healthcare should be as much of a right, more of a right, than gun ownership. As it stands now, our healthcare system is a bloated, inefficient, obscenely expensive mess, the fault of which lies in the lap of capital owners and the politicians they buy, whose greed and misanthropy cost millions of Americans their lives and livelihood. Don't let the Kafkaesque bureaucracy between perpetrator and victim cloud your moral judgment. People are dying of negligence and greed, of myopic power holders who neglect the well-being of their constituents. This is violence, Velcro, structural violence, and striking back to prevent its continuation into perpetuity is an act of self-defense.
So this is your argument, then? Violent revolution is justified because our healthcare system needs improvement? Even if I bought your moral argument, there are better ways to enact change. We wouldn't be having this argument if you were a reformist.
Whether or not there are better ways to enact change, and I genuinely do not believe there are, that doesn't invalidate the legitimacy of defensive violence. A person under attack may well have non-violent options to subdue their attacker. Every Marxist is taught the 8 essential chi junctions which can paralyze a person if struck, but the safest and most reliable method of defending yourself is often, as it is in this instance, violence.
You still haven't responded to my earlier point about conflating individual violence and legislation with negative outcomes. Your logic would have us lynching every politician who supports legislation which could conceivably hurt any number of people, which is basically all legislation. Society couldn't function under these rules.
Don't hyperbolize my argument. There's a wide chasm between we need to fight back against autocrats who enact and perpetuate suffering for personal gain, and all harm which comes from policy is directly attributable to the individuals who pushed it. We don't need to split hairs here. The necessity for revolution should be determined contextually, and in this context, I believe it just and necessary.
You don't just argue for violence against the rich and powerful, though. You've also spoken in favor of violence against fascists, white nationalists, anti-Semites, and other reactionaries. Contentious as their views are, many of these people have never inflicted any actual harm against another, certainly not harm which would justify execution.
The people you just listed would bring about genocide, deportation, slavery, and war if they ever obtained power. Theirs is a suicide cult. Violence against them is every much self-defense as violence against those in power.
They would accuse you of also bringing about genocide, deportation, slavery, and war. Should they feel justified in using violence against you?
They already do, and their accusations are far less substantiated than mine. Don't pretend fascists make good arguments.
What about when you're arguing with liberals and you describe the ways in which you would kill them if given the chance? That makes you sound incredibly unhinged.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I should probably stop doing that. Or, maybe I'll just keep it with my close friends like you guys, am I right? So, you were saying?
Assuming I agreed with your moral arguments, that doesn't speak to the effectiveness of advocating for violence. Anti-capitalists such as yourself have virtually no presence in higher government. You aren't substantially represented in any institution with real power. Military personnel and police officers often lean conservative. Violent revolution sounds like an incredibly ineffective way of enacting societal change.
I completely and totally agree with you.
You don't say.
If leftists took to the streets right now and started a revolution, we would get our asses handed to us. It's a good thing, then, that I don't advocate for a revolution today. Not tomorrow, either, or even in a decade. I advocate respect for the material conditions which must precede revolution. Class consciousness, capitalism in crisis, and evident inequality. For slow, methodical coalition building until a time at which revolution is not only achievable, but as humane and bloodless as possible.
More empty rhetoric.
Well, what do you want me to say? I don't believe a revolution is possible today, but I do believe it will be possible sometime in the indefinite future. I can't predict when that'll be. That doesn't make my argument unsound. Revolutions have succeeded in the past. They will continue to succeed in the future.
Revolutions have also gone horribly in the past. Many fail. Some succeed, and the new order turns out demonstrably worse than the old one. How do you even plan to conduct this revolution? Taking to the streets with your Mosins and Molotov cocktails?
The means by which a revolution should be conducted must also be contextually determined. Mosins won't even scratch the fucking mecha cop Evangelion units of the distant future.
And if those future leftists revolt and end up making everything worse?
Then they'll have to be careful, won't they?
That's not a convincing counter-argument.
Listen, you ideological necrophage. I can't guarantee to you or to anyone else that the revolution, when it does take place, will go perfectly. All I can guarantee you is that we need to try. We will, in the meantime, do everything possible to ensure it is one which is both successful and beneficial to humanity.
That's an argument of necessity. Are we moving to necessity?
Are you moving away from morality and effectiveness?
I suppose so. Necessity was always the most important point for you to make, and the one you'll have the most difficulty making. You've argued a revolution could be justified if you believe in class oppression, but you can't tell me when or how that revolution would happen, nor whether it would even necessarily succeed. That's not a strong case to build an argument from. Tell me, then, why we need this dubiously ethical revolution which might make everything worse for everybody.
Are you asking me to reiterate the sum of every argument ever made against capitalism? Every moral lapse, every contradiction, every market failure, every antagonism, every externality? I don't think YouTube will let me make a video that long.
I'm asking you to try.
I could never convince you, Velcro, because you don't believe political and socio-economic failures can count against capitalism unless it is absolutely 100% impossible for that failure to be addressed within a capitalist system, no matter how unlikely it actually is. I could go on for days about market failures, about the unregulated finance industry, about the markets collapsing every 1 or 2 decades, which I guess we're supposed to just get used to, about homelessness and poverty and stagnating wages and underemployment and crumbling infrastructure and regulatory capture. But all that shit could, technically, be fixed under capitalism. It's possible. Global income inequality is skyrocketing. Capitalists hoard trillions in tax havens overseas. We're probably past the point of no return with climate change. Education is somehow getting more expensive and less useful. But hey, it could be fixed under capitalism. Maybe. And then there are the problems intrinsic to capitalism, like the expectation of continuous growth, the prioritization of wealth over happiness, the petty dictatorship of the capital owner, the need for art to be commercially viable, which stifles creativity. Everything I just listed is, if not intrinsic, at least related to the systems by which capitalism perpetuates itself. Things are not fine. Things are not getting better across the board. We have to be mindful of these problems and mindful of the solutions socialism might potentially offer. We've not reached the end of history. We still live very much in a time of war, of chaos, of revolution, and of change. Let us be sure the changes we make are the right ones.
Are you finished proselytizing?
Yes, I am.
Good. I'm still not convinced.
I know you're not. By the time capitalism has made its failures evident enough to convince you, it may already be too late. Woo! Wow! Thank you for watching my YouTube video, everyone. And a huge thanks to Reddit user Omnic1, who purchased my microphone and hand-delivered it to me across 2,000 miles of continental United States. Let me know if you enjoyed the video, and also if you didn't, because I have no idea what I'm doing. Yeah, thank you, comrades.